Marcus just mentioned Web 4. So here, our next speaker is Jane McGonigal. She's really synonymous with our subjects, which is games and play. I'm also proud to say that she has a Berkeley connection. She got her PhD here at Berkeley in the Department of Theater, Dance, Performance Studies, where actually Gail's a professor. She's one of our stars. She went off and has done all kinds of amazing things. MIT named her one of the top 35 in the Tech Review. She's really a world authority on alternative reality games. She is also a researcher. What's your title at Future of the Form? There it is. Director of Games Research and Development. Please join me in welcoming Jane.
I thought that the theme for my comments today would be epic win. How many of you guys are gamers? Okay, so you guys know epic win is a term that gamers use to describe the best possible outcome, an outcome that is so positive you didn't even think it was possible, you didn't even dare dream that it was possible until it actually happened, and then you were like, wow, epic win! So I'm the Director of Game Research and Development at the Institute for the Future, and so I bring that kind of gamer approach to trying to think about the future, trying to imagine what best case scenario outcomes for humanity might be. What are the epic wins for the next decade? And when you look at different approaches to future forecasting, traditionally a lot of it has to do with risk mitigation or anticipating potential disasters and trying to avoid them. And this is really important, but when it comes to engaging the public in thinking about the future, it's not necessarily the most optimal approach to getting people involved. It can scare people off. It can cause them to shut down and not want to engage. So epic wins, I think, is a better way to try to get more people involved in preparing for and inventing the future. If you come to the Institute for the Future in Palo Alto, if you don't know IFTF, it's the oldest future forecasting organization in the world. It's been around for 40 years. And this is something that you'll see in our office. It's kind of become our motto in the last year or so. The idea that instead of trying to predict the future or see the future, we're just going to make the future. We're going to scan the future for possibilities, opportunities, new materials that we can use to shape life and work and government and health. And then we'll try to make the very best future we can. We can actually invent the epic win future that we want for ourselves. And so one thing that I've decided recently is that there's a very specific future that I want to make. I would like to see a game developer nominated for a Nobel Prize by the year 2020, a Nobel Peace Prize, which sounds crazy a little bit, but to back me up, let's bring a real Nobel Prize winning physicist here to give his thoughts. Einstein actually once famously said that games are the most elevated form of investigation, which is pretty weird for a scientist to say, yes? So what could he possibly have meant by that? Well, I actually love this quote because although it's been referenced in many Einstein biographies, there's no context for it. Nobody has any idea what he meant when he said it. So I've spent a lot of time trying to figure that out. One thing we do know is that Einstein was an avid chess player. So we can think about chess as a form of elevated investigation. When you play a single game of chess, you have two people come and sit down and agree to concentrate their attention and time in the same space, thinking about the same problem, the problem of how to capture this resource, how to manipulate the other player. And every time you sit down and play, you're approaching the problem from a different point of view of the other player. And when you play with them, you start to learn about their assumptions about the problem, their strategy for attacking the problem. And you can bring lots of people together to explore the same problem from massively multiple points of view in the same space, say, at a chess tournament, or over years as you become very intimately familiar with this problem, the spatial problem, the strategic problem, the psychological problem. You can amass enormous amounts of data about exactly how to approach and engage with this problem space. Now we see the same thing happening in online games, but at a much bigger scale. This is just a map of one MMO. This is EVE Online, and I like it because it just represents that kind of fire of attention and focus. Millions of people coming together to attack this particular game problem. And there are also creating a lot of shared collaborative knowledge resources, much in the way that information about chess developed over time through books and letters. We have wikis now for game worlds. Wikis, there are more wikis about games than any other subject in the world. There are 10,000 wikis alone on Wikia, which Jimmy may have talked about this morning. And the second biggest wiki in the world after Wikipedia is actually the World of Warcraft wiki. More than 1 million people have donated their insights about World of Warcraft to this wiki, which has more than 71,000 articles, and more than 5 million people use this wiki every month. People are also developing this kind of visual or content kind of shared understanding of game worlds. This is Spore, where people get to design their own creatures and upload them online, and then when you play the game, everything in your environment has actually been created by other players. So it's kind of like building a world together, and sort of a shared understanding of ecosystems. Oh, my stopwatch stopped. Irene, how am I doing?
You have over 5 minutes.
Perfect. Okay. So when you zoom out and think about all these people tackling a problem together from different points of views and amassing knowledge about it, you start to see all the gamers in the world as a really important potential resource. This is a map I put together of just some of the leading gamer nations in the world. We have 174 million gamers just in the United States alone. There are 2 million gamers in South Africa, 66 million in Western Europe, 5 in Russia, 9 million in India. And in total, there are 500 million people, 500 million people, who spend at least 500 hours a year playing online games. And it's actually, the numbers will grow very quickly because there are a number of companies who are looking towards developing markets, doing game consoles that actually connect gamers not over broadband internet, but over cell phone networks. And they anticipate growing the number of gamers over the next decade by an additional 1 billion by finding more markets in Brazil and India, China, and Africa. The other interesting statistic I wanted to share with you is that researchers at Carnegie Mellon recently calculated that the average young person in a gamer nation has spent 10,000 hours gaming by the time they reach the age 21. Which is incidentally the same number of hours that they spend in a classroom between 5th grade and graduating high school. So they are learning a lot about how to be a participant in an online game world. And the number 10,000 is actually quite significant. Have any of you read Outliers? Right, so you know the 10,000 hour theory, which Gladwell identified as kind of being this crucial threshold for becoming not just good at something, but becoming extraordinary at something. If you can accumulate 10,000 hours of practice at something, by the time you turn 21, you have a very good shot at being an extraordinary success. So Bill Gates spent 10,000 hours tinkering with computers before he was 21. Violin virtuosos spend 10,000 hours practicing. And if you only spend 8,000 hours or less, no extraordinary success. So it's kind of interesting that we have 500 million people right now in the world who are extraordinary at whatever it is that games make us good at. What is that resource that we can potentially tap? I think it has something to do with collaboration and collaborative investigation. We're currently spending 3 billion hours a week gaming collectively already. I think we should try and siphon off some of that time investigating fictional problems and start attacking real problems. That's been kind of a big question that we've been playing with a lot at the Institute for the Future. What if we could harness some of all of that collaboration, superpower bandwidth, and world-building talent for real-world knowledge building and problem solving? There's some interesting signals coming out of the game industry that commercial game developers are interested in this as well. When Will Wright released Spore, did a great interview with Jill Tarter, an astrobiologist. She said, "I'm interested in the possibility that learning to be good at a game makes you good at life, makes you good at changing the world, and gives you skills that are going to allow you to reinvent your environment." And then Will said, there's real value in being pushed towards global awareness and looking long term. That's one of the things that I find very useful about big games. These are the timelines we need to be looking at, the 10, 50, 100-year horizons, because most of the really bad stuff that's happening right now is a result of very short-term thinking. So I find that inspiring. This is one of my colleagues at the Institute for the Future, Jermaine Cascio, recently named to Foreign Policy's list of top 100 thinkers shaping the future of foreign policy. He has a term called super empowered hopeful individuals, or SEHIs for short. Those are people who feel like they have the power to change the future for the better. So we've been developing games that we think will put that power in the hands of individuals. They feel like they can positively shape the future. In my last couple minutes, I'm just going to show you very briefly what these projects are, and then we can probably talk more about them in the Q&A. A project that I worked on a couple years ago was called World Without Oil. This was a global simulation of an oil shortage. We told players that we were running on low capacity on oil, and we asked them to live their real lives and imagine how they would face everyday challenges without easy access to oil. And at the end of the 6-week simulation, we had accumulated an extraordinary amount of information from very personal points of view. This is just one compilation, The World Without Oil from A to Z. So we had a conference of working architects do a session on what architecture might be like in a world without oil. We had young people do a session on dating without oil, real estate without oil. We had Your Mama Without Oil, which was a group of moms thinking about motherhood in a world without oil, and even Zoom Zoom Without Oil, which was NASCAR enthusiasts trying to figure out what the future of NASCAR racing might be like in a world without oil. So it gave us that massively multiple points of view on a problem. So think of this as an optimistic forum for tackling peak oil. At IFTF last year, we did a game called Superstruct. We told people that a supercomputer had calculated the potential imminent collapse of the human species, and that we had 5 opportunities to try and fix it, inventing the future of energy, the future of food security, the future of health, the future of global security, and the future of social safety nets. We were able to engage 7,000 forecasters from 90 countries on 6 continents in 13 languages. This is a showing of the sort of age demographics. So you can see it was averaged between 20 and 40, but our youngest player was 8, and our oldest player was about 89. And this is just a list of fields that we had forecasters represented from, just so you can get a sense of really how many multiple points of views you can bring in to a game like this. And finally, so just to give you some metrics, we had 1,000 stories about this future, we had 500 active discussion forum topics, and 500 collaborative superstructures, or kind of working plans for solving these problems that our players came up with in just a few weeks. And then also last year we did at IFTF a kind of micro forecasting project. Think of this as Twitter for future forecasting. We called it the Scientific Lab, and we invited people to respond to provocative future scenarios about science and technology, and tell us what they thought the best case scenario outcomes would be and the worst case scenario outcomes would be. One that we did that was very popular was about the future of personal satellites. What if everybody could have their own tiny CubeSat in space? And then we would collect these Twitter-sized forecasts that you could respond to, arguing against them or building on the story. And then you could build up your kind of future forecasting skills, so it was a game. And then we would run these forecasting games at different locations around the world, at WebSoc in New Zealand, CeBIT in Germany, at eTech here in Silicon Valley, and then you could compare different communities' point of view on that problem. And this is my secret side that will only be up for 5 seconds, and if you choose to see it and remember it, you will be the first people in the world who have heard about this project, of which I am not allowed to say anything, and it might be out in March 2010. And so if you would like to get any of these slides and references, you can email that and it'll bounce back a link to the slides. And looking forward to discussing the future of play with everybody. Ken, thank you for inviting me to be part of the session. Clearly